Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Proftrof. Today I ain't feeling that well, so they're not gonna be that many. I'll probably put out like 2 or 3 videos today, and we call it quits. I think your boy's getting fucking sick again. Fuck. Anyway, this is The Insanity of Grappler Baki and Why You Should Care by Super Eyepatch Wolf. Okay, listen. If you're into martial arts and if you're into anime or any one of the two, you should see Baki. Baki is amazing. It's a fantasy martial arts anime where they fight. Realism does not exist in Baki. What exists in Baki is hype, entertainment. Yes.
Context things that happen during Grappler Baki. Baki, a 13-year-old boy, hurls himself off a cliff in order to obtain the near-death focus. Baki fights an opponent so strong he urinates himself twice before resolving the conflict with a make-believe cooking contest. Baki's romantic rival is Muhammad Ali Jr. Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Donald Trump are all canonical characters, the latter of which soils himself before signing a non-aggression treaty between the United States and the strongest fighter in the world. And finally, my personal favourite, Baki gets into a fight with a 9-foot-tall imaginary praying mantis. This is Grappler Baki. Grappler Baki is a martial arts based series following the life of Baki Hanma, a young competitive fighting prodigy on his quest to one day surpass his father, the invincible and terrifying Yujiro Hanma. The series has been in publication for 27 years over 132 volumes, which can be divided into 4 separate parts. In terms of anime, Baki has received a 50-minute 1994 OVA and a 2-season 2001 series, only to fall into hiatus for 17 years, which it only recently emerged from with this year's Netflix original anime simply titled Baki. Which I'm very happy about, because despite everything I said in the first 40 seconds of this video, my love for this series is completely unironic. For all the absurdity, there's a heart to Baki that makes it feel different from just about anything else. And to begin to explain why, I'd first like to talk about Baki's author, Keisuke Itagaki. Even among manga authors, Itagaki stands out as someone a little unusual. 2 of his previous titles include the series Make Up, which is a manga about, well, makeup, as well as Doge-san, which is a story about a man whose special ability is that he's very good at apologizing. It's easy to see from these titles alone that Itagaki has a very distinctive approach to creating manga, which he himself describes as tools to bring happiness. The thing that stands out about this man the most, however, is his lifelong love of martial arts. Itagaki was obsessed with Kempo as a child and took up boxing in his later years, even becoming a member of the Japanese self-defense force. And you can see this deep affection for fighting just from the sleeves of his manga, which are frequently adorned with photos of his encounters with a variety of fighters from different disciplines. And it's this love of martial arts and combat that is so palpable in every page of Baki. In my video on Dragon Ball Z, I said something to the effect of, Dragon Ball Z wasn't a story about fighting, it was a story about a group of characters who really loved to fight. And Grappler Baki is like the complete inverse of that. Baki is a series about fighting for fighting's sake. There's no overarching plot mechanics like the search for the Dragon Balls or the quest for One Piece. There's very little character development outside the different fighters' philosophies on combat. But the reason it works is each individual character is imbued with the same love of martial arts and fighting that's so palpable in Itagaki himself. Someone doesn't just do karate in Grappler Baki, it's seen as a system of beliefs that forge the body and soul of that person, with the series going to great lengths to illustrate this, often stopping encounters mid-fight to explain the specific techniques each martial artist is using.
And most of these techniques are actually real life techniques that people use. Like, I've trained karate for a little bit, a couple of months, still technically going. Not really with the whole corona shit, but some of the shit we saw in Baki, I've actually done in training and shit. Not really in a fight, because, it's a little bit different there, but whatever. What I want to say is, they take the realism and they throw it out the window sometimes because like they explain how the technique actually works, and then you see my boy fucking what was his name, Dopo, doing this fucking crazy shit and blocking 20 fists in a 0.1 seconds.
Down to
he's
the
a
most
beast, though.
minute
I love this
details,
dude.
like the particular way an individual fighter will clench their fist. And this can slow the pacing of these fights to a crawl, but it does put across just how much of themselves these characters have poured into mastering their individual fighting style. And so the drama comes with the question that forms when two of these fighters who both equally believe in their own martial art collide. One of my favourite instances of this comes in Baki Part 3, Son of Ogre, in which Retsu, a kung fu master who has dedicated his entire life to mastering the 4,000 years of Chinese Kenpo, goes up against the dangerous Pickle, who now...
This is the problem with Baki. When you go and try to explain what happens in Baki to someone that might be interested in Baki, you come up with these plot points that are kind of hard to explain, like Pickle. Yes, I want to see how my boy explains Pickle.
Bear with me here. Is a 190 million year old Neanderthal who is discovered frozen in a glacier before being thawed out and declared the strongest living creature on the planet. And so the question that this encounter presents is, can Retsu's sublime technique and lifetime of training overcome Pickle's overwhelming raw natural power? With the fight turning into a surprisingly moving meditation on what it is to dedicate your life to something and still have it not be enough. I should also note that the example I've just given is ludicrous. A kung fu master fighting a caveman is an insane concept for a fight, and what's more, it's one of only dozens of other equally outlandish encounters that occur over the course of the series. Grappler Baki is silly, really, really silly, but despite this, the story actually takes itself incredibly seriously.
Sometimes.
There's nothing supernatural in Baki's world, and it never veers into self-deprecation or winks at the audience, which only adds to the absurdity, but it also gives Baki what I can only describe as an endearing level of sincerity. The events being portrayed here are unbelievable, they are ridiculous, but it feels like Itagaki believes them, and as a result, we end up kind of believing them too, and it ends up being difficult not to get drawn into the bizarre logic of Baki's world. When Baki gets slammed so hard that his body liquefies, we believe it. When the muscles on Yujiro's back form the shape of a grinning demon, we believe it. And I've never really been sure on how self-aware Itagaki is of this aspect of his series, but it's his commitment to his own fiction that's always kept Baki from being just another wacky martial arts series, instead becoming something strange and even weirdly beautiful. I'm guessing right now the use of the word beautiful is going to have raised some eyebrows among you, especially in relation to how this series looks. And I get that, the artwork of Baki...
Give me 1 second, what the fuck? Hey, we're back. I thought someone was trying to fucking open my door. I was like, what the hell?
Is about the only thing more bizarre than its story. The characters are depicted as these grotesque portraits of masculinity, vascular nightmares of the human form, where anatomy is to be abused and distorted. And I can understand if that's off-putting to a lot of people. But hear me out here. There's a big difference between not understanding human anatomy and having that understanding while actively fucking with it. Break down any of Itagaki's figure work and you can see a very clear, albeit highly exaggerated understanding of human anatomy and musculature, coupled with an intense eye for detail. And if you're cynical about that, just look at this illustration of a shoe. Look at the love and observation that's gone into conveying each tiny part of it.
Wait, what the fuck?
And taking drawing like this
What
into
am I looking at? Is this a boot?
account, it's hard to argue that Itagaki is anything other than an extremely talented draftsperson. And so if he wanted to draw more, we'll say reasonable looking figures, he'd be well capable of it. And so the question now becomes, why does he choose to draw humans like this? The answer being that nothing is more important to Itagaki than illustrating figures that convey weight and power, even at the expense of traditional aesthetic appeal, and it works. There's a sense of physicality and strength to the characters of Grappler Baki that creates a solid, nearly three-dimensional feel. And in a story where every major encounter hinges on two people pitting their bodies against one another, that feeling of solidity is vital. So, whatever your personal opinion of the art style of Baki, I think it's hard to argue that it isn't at least suited to the story being told. But there's a second layer to Itagaki's technique that elevates the combat of Baki, and that is his mastery of gesture. Gesture is a term used in life drawing, the idea being that any pose of the human body, there is a central line that runs from the base of the feet to the tip of the skull, with a skilled artist being able to identify that line and accentuate it to create a sense of movement and intention within their drawing. And this is a technique Itagaki is adept at. Within his illustrations, there's always a very clear and readable central line that flows through the character, and one that, despite all the detail, gives them a sense of momentum and speed. In fact, he's so good at conveying this line, he'll even sometimes extend it beyond the character's body in the form of abstracted punches or kicks, where fists or feet aren't even illustrated, and yet we still
Wow, I never thought about it. That actually makes so much sense.
feel
What the
the
hell?
impacts. It's the combination of both these principles, Itagaki's ability to imbue weight and physicality into his character work, and to move those characters with a sense of flow and gesture, that gives the fights
Hey,
of Grappler
Musashi.
Baki a real feeling of brutality and strife, which in turn communicates just how badly each competitor wants to win. And so, every part of Grappler Baki is built around the idea of fighting. There's never a moment in the story when we aren't either experiencing a major fight or building anticipation for the next big showdown. And building anticipation is the final part of what makes Grappler Baki's fights so captivating. One of the many ways pro wrestling and battle anime are alike is the idea of building heat for a match, to create as much anticipation as possible so that the audience will pay to see the conclusion. And this is something that Grappler Baki is adept at. It has this way of building up its characters so that they feel like these legitimate, dangerous monsters. Meaning when it's
Yo, how old is? By the way, this dude, I think. How old do you think this
Monsters.
guy is? Because I'm pretty sure he was like, what? Was he 16 here? Or was he 18 here? He was either 16, 15, or 18 here. I'm not exactly sure.
Meaning when it's actually time to fight, we're already invested. And it does this with the same level of absurdity found in every other part of the series. But just like the rest of the series, it is effective. For example, Jack Soma was a ghoulish
Oh,
fixture
Jack.
at his local gym. A disturbing portrait of skin and bone, he'd spend hours obsessively pounding away at the heavy bag in the vain hopes of one day achieving the strength he'd need to face that man. But all his sweat and passion would amount to nothing. Born with a slight frame and ineffective muscles, Jack's refusal to rest and his obsessive need to train would only damage his body further, leaving him exhausted and frail and robbing him of the strength he'd need to compete in martial arts, causing those around him to view Jack as a ghastly spectre of failure, first earning sympathy, then ire, then ridicule. This would continue until the day that a leading genetic scientist visits Jack's gym, and upon seeing the skeletal figure pummeling endlessly away, sees within Jack the perfect combination of physical weakness and stringent mental discipline that would make him the ideal candidate for a revolutionary new performance-enhancing drug. And the results are dramatic and horrifying. Jack's body quickly grows into a twisted nightmare of strength and power. He begins shattering world records and surpassing all human limitation. But still, it's not enough, with Jack developing an uncontrollable addiction to the drug exceeding its maximum dosage and driving his body to terrifying new heights as he re-enters the world of martial arts, and years of ridicule and hatred awaken a brutal side of Jack as he leaves a trail of broken bodies in his wake. With Jack slowly descending into a violent madness, the scientist who had once sought to help him now realizes the horror that he's unleashed upon the world and takes his own life, but not before informing Jack that the strain on Jack's system has become so severe that he only has 6 months to live. And so, in Jack's final days, he steps forward and enters the Maximum Tournament as a literal time bomb of rage and violence, obsessed with facing the unknown as Baki Hanma. So, just to note again, this story is ridiculous, but I'm also willing to bet that there are at least a few of you right now who are very curious to see what happens to Jack and how
Jack
he
is
fares
fucking
in the
awesome.
Maximum Tournament. And it's that feeling of anticipation that pulls you through Baki's story towards the next major fight. So at this point, I'm hoping I've convinced at least some of you that this is a series really worth getting into. And so the question now becomes, where should you start?
Oh god.
Well, in terms of anime, the 1994 OVA covers about the first 50 chapters and has some really cool animation. The two-season 2001 series remixes the start of Baki's story but covers basically the same material as well as the Maximum Tournament arc. But it does have a very limited animation style, especially in the second season, which was completed only a few months after the first, and it really shows. And so with that in mind, I'd actually recommend starting with the most recent 2018 series. That might sound a little unusual, as the 2018 series is a direct continuation of the Maximum Tournament arc and begins about 276 chapters into the story. But think of it like this. If someone wants to get into Batman, they don't start at Detective Comics 27, because that is no longer an accurate reflection of what contemporary Batman is. And Baki is kind of the same. Both in writing and art style, the series has evolved a lot from its early chapters. And given its lack of any real overarching plot or story outside Baki and Yujiro's rivalry, you're not missing a whole lot by starting at the 2018 anime.
No. I was agreeing with about everything else he said in this video, but this is complete bullshit. Listen, if you skip the 2000 wherever series, the first and the second season, you skip the introduction to some of the most awesome characters that you're gonna keep seeing in the series, in the animations. And if you skip the introduction to them, you skip a lot of the attachment you would have if you saw it, because they are amazing. Believe me, they are amazing. And if you skip their introductions and attachment, the 2018 series becomes a lot less enjoyable. Trust me, you need to watch the first and the second season from whatever year he said it was. Do not listen to him about this. He is wrong.
Which will give you a much clearer taste of what modern Baki is. And from there, you're free to dive into the earlier parts if you decide this series is for you. It does a much better job of translating Itagaki's unique visual style into animation and covers one of my favourite arcs in all of Baki, the most deadly death row inmates arc, in which 5 of the world's most dangerous criminals break out of different prisons on different continents and, completely unbeknownst to each other, all swim to Japan in order to be able to face Baki.
4 of them swim, 1 of them takes a plane.
And no defeat. And even by Baki standards, this arc is wild. It's built around the fundamental question of which is superior, pure martial arts technique or the violence and brutality of the world's most vicious criminals. With battles no longer being sportsmanlike contests of skill confined to an arena, but vicious, brutal street fights that can occur anywhere at any time. I could go on for a long time recounting all the insane shit that happens during this series. There's a fight in a roller coaster, a security guard gets his intestines blown out through his ear. This happens. Yep. And I've always seen this arc as a kind of turning point for Itagaki, where he truly embraced the madness of his own series and evolved it into the insane spectacle it is today. But all that said, while I think the Netflix series will give you a great sense of what Baki is, to really experience the series at its fullest, there is no substitute for the manga itself, and that's not even just because of Itagaki's artwork, but because Baki as a manga captures why I read manga at all. What I love about comics is that they're the only form of visual storytelling that can be feasibly produced by a single creator on a consistent basis. And so these stories you get from them can feel a lot more individualistic and personal than a bigger production potentially could. And particularly with manga, where traditionally a creator is tied to the one series and characters. And I think something special happens when a person puts their unique obsessions and experiences into creating a world and story. And that's the feeling I get when I read Grappler Baki. For all its absurd, outlandish, and straight up insane ideas, there's a level of sincerity to it that I think could only come from a singular vision. And I think that's really cool. I think that's something that people should care about. Friends, thank you for joining me today. I really hope you...
This video was awesome. Baki is amazing. And if you're gonna watch the 2018-17 series, wherever that year the Netflix series comes out, watch the first 2 seasons first. Please trust your boy. You're gonna get introduced some of the most amazing characters in anime history. Like my boy Dopu. And the others whose names I forgot. Like the dude that does the takedowns and shit. And all the other clowns. They're awesome. And if you miss their introduction, the 2018 series is just gonna seem like your standard fighting anime. And it is a lot more than that. It is about the evolution of all these characters. Because what's so good about the Baki series is not only Baki. Like in most series, just mostly the main character evolves. Even though in Baki, the main series is, centralized around Baki. All the characters around him, surrounding him, they evolve as well, which is amazing to see. Okay, and those are my final words. Watch Baki, but start off from the first 2 seasons, and then you can continue with the Netflix series. They're all awesome. Trust your boy. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time, everybody. Have a nice working day.